Hi, I'm Rashonda Kate. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading The House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. We are on chapter 12, Tryon Goes to Patesville. We read the first portion of it last time. Honestly, I don't think we're going to finish it. The chapter, I mean, this time, but we'll give it a try. So I'll go back a paragraph. Let's see, Tryon is waiting in the doctor's office. Oh, okay, yeah. Tryon was waiting in the doctor's office. He's talking to the doctor. And the doctor says, "The man you want to see," he added later in the conversation, "is old Judge Straight. He's getting somewhat stiff in the joints, but he knows more law and more about the McSwain estate than any other two lawyers in town. If anybody can collect your claim, Judge Straight can. I'll send my boy Dave over to his office. Dave," he called to his attendant, "run over to Judge Straight's office and see if he's there. There was a freshet here a few weeks ago," he went on, when the colored man had departed, "and they had to open the floodgates and let the water out of the mill pond, for if the dam had broken, as it did 20 years ago, it would have washed the pillars from under the judge's office and let it down in the creek, and—" "Judge Straight ain't in the office just now, sir," reported the doctor's man Dave from the head of the stairs. "Did you ask when he'd be back?" "No, sir. You didn't tell me to, sir." Oh, I love this tactic. So we are beyond slavery in the time frame of this book, but just barely beyond slavery. But that was a tactic of insurrection and revolt that slaves used often. I may not be able to kick you in your teeth or even not do any of the things you've told me to do, but I don't always have to do the best at them now, do I? Clearly, it crossed this man's mind to ask when the judge would be back, but he didn't. And his excuse was, "That's not what you told me to do." So one of the stereotypes about Black people is that we're not very bright. And in part, that stereotype comes from revolutionary acts like this, that to somebody who is outside of the revolution just sees, "Oh, wow, you're not very bright." But to someone inside of the revolution says, "This was your opportunity to stick it to the man, and you did." All right, so did you ask when he'd be back? "No, sir, you didn't tell me to, sir." "Well, now go back and inquire. The niggers," he explained to Tryon, "are getting mighty trifling since they've been freed. Before the war, that boy would have been around there and back before you could say Jack Robinson. Now the lazy rascal takes his time, just like a white man." Okay, so we got to the whole stereotype of Black people being lazy, and I do not understand how you could characterize a population that was enslaved and literally built the country as lazy, but we'll bypass that. "Now the lazy rascal takes his time, just like a white man." Good for him. If it's good enough for a white man to take his time, it's good enough for anybody to take his time. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not cool. All right. Dave returned more promptly than from his first trip. "Judge Straight's there now, sir," he said. "He's done come in." "I'll take you right around and introduce you," said the doctor, running on pleasantly like a babbling brook. "I don't know whether the judge ever met your mother or not, but he knows a gentleman when he sees one." Let's just let that simmer, but he knows a gentleman when he sees one, and will be glad to meet you and look after your affair. See to the patients, Dave, and say I'll be back shortly, and don't forget any messages left for me. Look sharp now. You know you're failing. And it's your failing, Y-O-U-R, not Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. So he's not saying, you know, you are failing. He's like, you know, you're failing. You know what you're not good at. Make it happen anyway. They found Judge Straight in his office. He was seated by the rear window and had fallen into a gentle doze. The air of Patesville was conducive to slumber. A visitor from some bustling city might have rubbed his eyes on any but a market day and imagined the whole town asleep. that the people were somnambulists and did not know it. The judge, an old hand, roused himself so skillfully at the sound of approaching footsteps that his visitors could not guess but that he had been wide awake. He shook hands with the doctor and acknowledged the introduction to Tryon with a rare old-fashioned courtesy, which the young man thought a very charming survival of the manners of a past and happier age. A past and happier age. Oh my gosh, we are just out of the Civil War and we are already romanticizing the antebellum South. I guess it didn't take any time. Oh, fiddle-dee-dee, it was so much better when I had slaves who could do all my work for me. No, replied the judge in answer to a question by Dr. Green. I never met his mother. I was a generation ahead of her. I was at school with her father, however, 50 years ago. 50 years ago! No doubt that seems to you a long time, young gentleman. It is a long time, sir, said Tryon. I must live more than twice as long as I have in order to cover it. Oh, how cute. He's not even 25. That's so cute. A long time and a troubled time, sighed the judge. I could wish that I might see this unhappy land at peace with itself before I die. Things are in a sad tangle. I can't see the way out, but the worst enemy has been slain in spite of us. We are well rid of slavery. But the Negro we still have with us, remarked the doctor. Cool, we're done with slavery. But oh, whatever will we do with these Negroes? And hence, if you've ever heard the phrase, the Negro problem. That's the crux of it. We've got these free Black people. Whatever shall we do with them? This is the Negro problem. There's got to be something done with them. But whatever shall it be? But the Negro we still have with us, remarked the doctor, for here comes my man Dave. What is it, Dave? He asked sharply as the Negro stuck his head in at the door. Dr. Green, he said, I forgot to tell you, sir, that young woman was at the office again just before you come in and said for you to go right down and see her mammy as soon as you could. Ah, yes, and you've just remembered it. I'm afraid you're entirely too forgetful for a doctor's office. You forgot about old Mrs. Latimer the other day, and when I got there, she had almost choked to death. Now get back to the office and remember, the next time you forget anything, I'll hire another boy. Remember that. That boy's head, he remarked to his companions after Dave had gone, reminds me of nothing so much as a dried gourd with a handful of cowpeas rattling around in it in lieu of gray matter. An old woman out in Red Bank got a fishbone in her throat the other day and nearly choked to death before I got there. A white woman, sir, came very near to losing her life because of a lazy, trifling Negro. A white woman came very near to losing her life. Oh my. I guess it would have been all right had she not been white. I should think you would discharge him, sir, suggested Tryon. What would the use be, rejoined the doctor. All Negroes are alike, except that now and then there's a pretty woman along the borderline. All Negroes are alike, except every now and then there's a pretty woman along the borderline. A pretty Negro woman along the borderline, just like our friend Rena, on the borderline between white and Black. We've talked about tragic mulattoes before, and at least in literature, they are beautiful on the borderline. Have you ever read La Frontera by Gloria Anzaldúa? It's about borderlines and navigating them and transgressing them. It's been a really long time since I've read it. Now I'm thinking about it though. Anyway, take this patient of mine, for instance. I'll call on her after dinner. Her case is not serious. 30 years ago, she would have made any man turn his head to look at her. You know who I mean, don't you, Judge? And so let's not forget that Rena and Warwick's mom was also described as a mulatto, but not as liked as Rena. Yes, I think so, said the judge promptly. I've transacted a little business for her now and then. I don't know whether you've seen the daughter or not. I'm sure you haven't for the past year or so, for she's been away. But she's in town now, and by Jove, the girl is really beautiful. And I'm a judge of beauty. Do you remember my wife 30 years ago, Judge? She was a handsome woman, Ed, replied the other judicially. If I had been 20 years younger, I should have cut you out. You mean you would have tried? But as I was saying, this girl is a beauty. I reckon we might guess where she got some of it, eh, Judge? Human nature is human nature. But it's a damn shame that a man should beget a child like that and leave it to live the life open for a Negro. So they know who the dad is. We don't know. I want to know. If she had been born white, the young fellows would be tumbling over one another to get her. Her mother would have to look after her pretty closely as things are if she stayed here. But she disappeared mysteriously a year or two ago and has been at the North, I'm told, passing for white. She'll probably marry a Yankee. He won't know any better, and it will serve him right. She's only too white for them. She has a very striking figure, something on the Greek order, stately and slow moving. She has the manners of a lady, too, a beautiful woman, if she is a nigger. Let's see what Tryon has to say. I quite agree with you, Ed, remarked the judge dryly, that the mother had better look closely after the daughter. Ah, no, Judge, replied the other with a flattered smile. My admiration for beauty is purely abstract. 25 years ago, when I was younger, when you were young, corrected the judge. When you and I were younger, continued the doctor ingeniously. 25 years ago, I could not have answered for myself, but I would advise the girl to stay at the North if she can. She's certainly out of place around here. Hey, look, I think we're going to finish. Tryon found the subject a little tiresome and the doctor's enthusiasm not at all contagious. He could not possibly have been interested in a colored girl under any circumstances, and he was engaged to be married to the most beautiful white woman on earth. To mention a Negro woman in the same room where he was thinking of Rena seemed a little short of profanation. Profanation. I feel like I should use that word. I assume it means profane. Profanation. Ah. So I am absolutely thrilled that they are talking about Rena, this Negro woman who could pass for white and should, right? He literally said she should stay up north and not come back here. She should marry a Yankee. And Tryon is like, she couldn't possibly be as beautiful as my Rena, the most beautiful white woman on earth. If you are not laughing at this, why not? This stuff is funny. All right. His friend, the doctor, was a jovial fellow, but it was surely doubtful taste to refer to his wife in such conversation. He was very glad when the doctor dropped the subject and permitted him to go more into detail about the matter which formed his business in Patesville. He took out of his pocket the papers concerning the McSwain claim and laid them on the judge's desk. You'll find everything there, sir. The note, the contract, and some correspondence that will give you the hang of the thing. Will you be able to look over them today? I should like, he added a little nervously, to go back tomorrow. What? Exclaimed Dr. Green vivaciously. Insult our town by staying only a day? It won't be long enough to get acquainted with our young ladies. Patesville girls are famous for their beauty. But perhaps there's a lodestone in South Carolina to draw you back? Ah, you changed color. So he's blushing. To my mind, there's nothing finer than the ingenuous blush of youth, but we'll spare you if you'll answer one question. Is it serious? I'm to be married in 2 weeks, sir, answered Tryon. The statement sounded very pleasant in spite of the slight embarrassment caused by the inquiry. Good boy, rejoined the doctor, taking his arm familiarly. They were both standing now. You ought to have married a Patesville girl, but you people down towards the eastern counties seldom come this way, and we are evidently too late to catch you. I'll look over your papers this morning, said the judge, and when I come from dinner, we'll stop at the courthouse and examine the records and see whether there's anything we can get hold of. If you'll drop in around 3 or 4 o'clock, I may be able to give you an opinion. Now, George, exclaimed the doctor, We'll go back to the office for a spell, and then I'll take you home with me to luncheon. Tryon hesitated. Oh, you must come. Mrs. Green would never forgive me if I didn't bring you. Strangers are rare birds in our society, and when they come, we make them welcome. Our enemies may overturn our institutions and try to put the bottom rail on top, but they cannot destroy our Southern hospitality. There are so many carpetbaggers and other social vermin creeping into the South with the Yankees trying to force the niggers on us that it's a genuine pleasure to get acquainted with another real Southern gentleman whom one can invite into one's house without fear of contamination and before whom one can express his feelings freely and be sure of perfect sympathy. Whoa! Okay, the South is dying hard. They are not going gently into that good night. He was like, these Yankees are carpetbaggers and social vermin. These Yankees are forcing niggers on us. How are you? You had the black people there to start with. How was anybody forcing anybody on you? Is it that difficult to treat somebody better? Man, and then calling Tryon a real Southern gentleman whom one can invite into one's house without fear of contamination? Gracious. And before whom one can express his feelings freely and be sure of perfect sympathy? Oh, you are making a lot of assumptions, sir. Wow. Okay. Thus ends chapter 12. Man, a lot of stuff jumped off on chapter 12. So we're reading House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda.